just want to say thank you for coming on. Honestly, we started the podcast back towards the beginning of the summertime, and I've had a lot of student athletes on, coaches, and just some alumni, even from South Carolina. So to have you on is it's a great deal, honestly, and everything because everything that you've done for the sport, not only in America, but for South Carolina. I think that's really what we try to hit on the most. Um, Something I would kind of always start off with um, is the big question: how'd you get started running? What's the story?
Actually, it was just by sort of by accident. I didn't know anything about running. I was big in football and basketball, and I played on my junior high team. And my PE coach, well, PE teacher, he was the track coach for the high schools. In PE, we used to have to run a lap around the football field in seventh grade. Another guy and I, we used to race, and I would always beat everyone. So my PE teacher said he asked me to come out for the track team in January. So I went out there. I had no clue what track was about, and I was out there running with the distance runners. Matter of fact, I just had on my regular clothes, what I wore to school. I had no
There you go.
gear or nothing. And I was just running. I didn't know anything about running, and then until the first track meet in March, that's when I ran the 3,200 meters. I was winning the race all the way until the last 200 meters or last 100 meters, and then I got out kicked and I came in fifth place. So everyone was like, "Oh man, you're gonna be good once you become a ninth grader and all this." But I never got even. I didn't even get faster. My first race was my best race that year in seventh grade. So that's kind of how I learned about track and running. I still didn't really care for running. I wasn't. I like football and basketball. I was on the basketball football team, and only time I would start running is when it's getting like in January when we have to start up for track because we didn't have a cross country team or anything, and I just knew I had to like run and be in shape so I could at least not come in last place in the races. But it just seemed like around my eighth grade year, I wasn't winning, but I was always in the top three, four. So I just kept doing that. So that's kind of how I got introduced into track by my
No, that's cool.
teacher.
Yeah, that's cool. I find it always interesting because I think everybody has their story, and sometimes you get guys and gals that they played soccer or they played other sports and they kind of gravitated towards running eventually, and whether to stay in shape or things like that. And mine, I had friends that lived on another street of mine, and they had their whole family ran, and I was just like, oh, like that looks fun too. Let me join in, and
Right.
ended up being and that was I was probably in fourth or fifth grade, and from there on, obviously, just my whole life now has been around running. Um, when you talk about like that first race and leading it, did it was it natural to you? Like, was running just easy to kind of pick up right away?
Well, I just know like in the race, I just assumed you had to like win. Like my thing was you had to go for the win, and then you didn't want to come in last place. So that was I was nervous about. Like I was so nervous that I was gonna get laughed at because I came in last. So then I was like thinking, well, if I just can beat half the field, I'll be okay. So, but once again, I kind of knew you have to go for the win. So I remember that first race after about the mile mark, I was like, this is kind of easy. So I just went to the front. And next thing you know, I'm in the front and everybody's all excited. And so I'm leading the race. I led it probably all the way to, like I say, the last 150 meters after the mile. But, now all these older kids, they start out kicking. I didn't know anything about a kick. So I got passed up, came in fifth. But I just remember, I guess, when I was a kid, even younger than that, like maybe like elementary school. I remember in my neighborhood, it was these older guys, and there's this one guy lived down the street. He was into fitness. He was kind of bodybuilder, and he used to work out, and he was in fitness. So he was an older guy. He's like probably a junior in high school. So, and most of the other guys on my street, they were older than me. I was younger, so I was like maybe like fourth grade. And then I remember he used to go running at night. This is in the summertime. He would go run maybe about an hour, and he would always invite the older kids that come run with him and all. But I wanted to go too, but he was like, "No, you can't go. You too little, because we leave you. We're not gonna wait for you." So I used to beg, and he would never let me go. So then one night he said, "All right, you can go," because everybody was like, saying, "Why you don't let Terrance go?" So so he was like, I mean, he was a very intimidating guy because you didn't want to mess up with him. So I'm on this run, and I looking back at it, it's around our neighborhood, but it's about a mile long, a mile, maybe a little over a mile. But I remember keeping up with them, and then he kept looking like he was like waiting for me to, to get tired and all this. And then I remember when we finished the run, and I wasn't that tired. I mean, I was, he was kind of shocked. So that was my very first run, my very first time ever testing out. And I just remember keeping up. And then the older guys, they were tired. I don't know. I guess my drone was so high because I didn't want to disappoint. Bean, that was his name, his nickname.
No, that's funny. And it's funny, you mentioned too, like you just like not wanting to come in last place. I think that's like everybody of us, like all of us. We just don't want to, as long as we're not last, it's okay. Um, High school running, you know, I'm curious because not many people start off with the 32. Because most people try to like stay away from the 32. Even distance runners, like all talking about it all the time, they hate the 32. Um, Everybody loves the mile and the 8. Was it was it easy to find your event? Like, was there one that came a little bit more natural, just running it in high school?
Well, I just remember I started like in seventh grade, and I ran the 32. Like I remember in the seventh and the eighth grade, my coach well, you got to run the 800 so you know how to kick. So it was just the 800 was so intense. I guess I wasn't strong enough. I was only like a seventh grader. So, but the 32 was less intense. So it was not an intense race. So that's what I was good at. And so in the eighth grade, that's what I never wanted to run the mile. I used to, some of the dual meets, he would throw me in 800, man, I used to dread it. And I used to get blasted in the 800 because I didn't like it. But the 3200 was not intense. It gave me a time like about after the first mile, I could relax and pick keep up with the pace, and I did it all the way to my ninth grade year. My ninth grade year, that was the first time I made it to the state in the ninth grade in the 32, and then my sophomore year, I came in second in the 3200. By my sophomore year, in some of the dual meets, I would have to run the 1600 for points. I most time I would never win the 1600 or the 800. I maybe come in second or third, but I would always win the 3200. Back then, the 3200 was the very first race of the track meets. Maybe I was just fresher, but um, I really liked the 3200 because it was not as intense as the 1600 and 800. So I just remember my sophomore year at state meet, it came down to me and Bobby Urban in the last 300 of the state meet. We were neck and neck, and then the last 100, he put like maybe about a second on me. That last 100, he outkicked me. And then he came in first, and I came in second. I ran like a 9:39. think I ran a 9:38. He ran like a 9:37, and then I just remember going into the next year, my coach was saying, "Well, you need to start running the 1600 and the 800 so you can have a better kick. So when you go to the state meet, because that's where you fail." And so that my junior year was the first time I kind of like committed to saying, "Okay, I'm gonna run the 1600 and the 800 at the track meets, knowing that I'm just preparing myself for the 3200 meters at the end of the year." And then it just, for some reason, my junior year, just the first few meets of the year, running that 1600. I mean, I was. It was just like, wow, I'm winning. I'm winning the races. I'm beating them, and I'm not even tired. I'm like, I only have to run 4 laps now instead of running 8. And so then I would run the 800, and it seemed like now I was able to handle the 800 a little better. So I was winning the 800 races in dual meets, and it's just, and then it was just one race where I ran. It was like an invitation in 1600, and then I ran against my rival, but it was in the 1600, not the 3200, and I beat him. And I mean, my last lap was real fast. I mean, I just put like 6 seconds on him at the end. Everybody was like, "Man, the 1600 might be your race." And then it just, as the season progressed, I started running 1600, and then I also was running the mile relay too. I was the anchor leg on the mile relay, so it seemed like, I don't know, somehow my speed developed in my junior year, because I was on my team. I was probably the fastest 400-meter runner on our team by my. I was at least the second or the fastest 400-meter runner on my team my junior year. So then when it was time for region and lower state, it was time to make that decision to go back to the 32. But by this time, I was like, I had already won some big races in the state, in the 1600 meters. I was close to the state record at the time. So I was like, well, I hadn't lost. I'm just stick with this. So I stayed with the 1600 and the 800 to go into the state meet. So that's kind of how I got started with it. But just looking back at it, I'm glad I did the 3200, because the 3200 is a race that it makes you tough. It makes you make. You're gonna have to make a business decision around that fifth lap, whether you're gonna stay with the pace or you're not. And then I think that just made the 1600, because the 1600 it was never. I was never in a dilemma where, hey, I can't keep up with the pace. It was just, man, these 3 laps are so easy, and then now I only got one more lap to go. I just blow people out, and so it was so easy. It was just, I don't know. But looking back at it, I think it's all, I was just older. I was an older kid. I probably was like 15 then. First start, I was like 13, 14. I just wasn't strong enough to handle that intensity.
Yeah, the 8. Yeah, when you do look at the 8 and the 16, it really is just it's just another beast of a race. There's just no time. I talk to guys all the time, and I'm like, there really has to be almost like instincts to react, and it's quick. Either go or you don't go, and if you kind of miss that opportunity, I mean, you could lose the race right there. Versus the 32, you do have more time. That's so unique though, because you usually, if you don't have the speed, yeah, then you go to the 32. I've never really seen anybody go from 32 and just flourish just in the 16 and the 8 so well. No, that's so cool. That is so cool. I want to talk about the growth through the years. When I ran, and that's back in 07 to 13 is my high school, middle school days. We would talk about guys running sub 4 for the mile, and it'd be news. It'd be huge news. Maybe get one kid to do it a year, maybe every couple of years. Now it's like there's these kids that can just do it. Like a couple of them every single year. We just had 16-year-old make the world team, and he ran like 142 in the
Mm-hmm.
eight.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Just
Mm-hmm.
how much growth has happened, and especially when we look in like South Carolina, there's always been onesies and twosies that have had a year, and then maybe it's a down year for the state. But I really want to say like last year track season for me, um, really I think highlighted South Carolina running. I'm from Florida, so I kind of always compare the states uh, just because that's where I'm from originally. And I remember talking to my daughter because she runs track, and I was saying like, man, there's already like 10 girls that are sub 11 in the 2 mile this year. Like in South Carolina, they only have like two, and then before you know it, like All American Classic happened, and there was just a ton of girls breaking 11. You had girls going sub 5, and on the guys side obviously Caleb and his breakout races. um
Mm-hmm.
Ty Jones, there's so many. When you look at the growth through the years, is it something that you've noticed? I mean, obviously I know you got an opportunity to meet with Caleb and talk to him about him getting the records and all that jazz. But I mean, even just for you to kind of see that and see the growth of South Carolina running, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's definitely a phenomenal situation right now. I think the biggest difference now compared to when I was running is information and technology. When I was running back in the '80s, that's when I was in high school. We didn't have Mondo tracks. So technology, we didn't have Mondo. Most of your races would run on dirt tracks, gravel tracks, and then it was like one or two. Like I remember Sumter High School, they had a sort of a rubber track, something similar that you might see at a middle school. That was one of the best tracks for us high school. Then we run at University of South Carolina, which had a tartan track, and that was the best track in the state of South Carolina. So you only ran there at the state meet, so your times could be faster. But back then, I just know with me, I didn't I didn't have a concept of times. All I just knew I had to. You want to beat runners. You was going for the win, so you was trying to be state. So it wasn't like you was um, training to see how fast you could be. It was just about whether I'm gonna beat this person. So it was racing. It wasn't about the clock. So that's all I did. I just trained to know that when it's time to race this person, can I beat this person? So I didn't like kind of train for times. I did kind of. I used to read track and field magazines. My coach used to give me this track and field magazines, and then I knew that there were runners like in others like could run like a 4:12, 1600, or I've even heard of people out in Oregon running, in California running 4:10, nine flat 3200s, 2 miles. I've heard of them before, but it didn't really matter because in my state, all I needed to do was run like 424 or something like that, or 156 to maybe win state meets. So that's kind of all I kind of focused on. But I think that's a big difference now. Back then, you didn't have the internet. Nobody could kind of watch other people train and figure out how to train. And luckily, my high school coach, he ran in college. He was a 5K runner and cross country runner at Duke University. So he was a real good coach, but he trained me basically sort of like long, slow distance, build up base. So that's why the 3200 was something I was started out with. But as I got older, I just started having this God gift talent. So with me, I just know is a lot of it is, uh, good just God given talent because basically, I didn't really run year round. I only started training like in January, and then around about April, I'm in shape to be at state level. So there's a few months, and then you have the state meet in May, and then once that is over, I don't even run it. I won't start back running again until January. So it was just information that I didn't know that you're supposed to train all year long, and you know run car. We didn't even have a cross country team, so I remember I ran one time. My coach he put me in as unattached my sophomore year, a couple of cross country meets, and I had to train for it. So I ran in the middle of the pack. I didn't really like cross country because it was, and then, but once my, I say after my junior year, going into the fall of my senior year, that's when I started training like, like, like how a national class high school person is supposed to train, running maybe about 45 miles a week, running a long run. Just I started out training in September, and then we did have a cross country team at that point. And so that made it fun for me to want to run cross country. And sure enough, I mean, by just being training consistently, by November, I won the state meet in cross country, set the state record in cross country as well. But by this time, I'm starting to train like how you're supposed to train. So I think kids now they know they got way more information on how to train because I know when I was coaching, maybe back in 2013, I used to coach at Fort Mill high school kids, and I mean their knowledge and what they were doing was twice as much as what I was doing in high school. But I think with me, it's a lot of it is, I had a lot of God given talent. Like, it was just the fact that I was able to be very disciplined. I think what helped me was like I had a lot of speed. Like my speed was just tremendous compared to a lot of kids, but I had that background of learning how to improve my endurance, and I think that's what helped me. But I think kids now, like I say, the amount of information, the knowledge, they can go on YouTube, they can go on the internet. They know so much how to train and eat right and have a proper diet, and so that's why they're running faster. And kudos to them. They're figuring it out. But I see that's the biggest difference. And for us, yeah, they're looking for times where I just remember when I was running, it was all about racing. Who you could beat in the county. You get in a race with somebody, you want to see if you better than you can win the county meet, then you get in your region or conference. You want to see if you can beat that guy in the conference, and in the state meet, same thing. So it wasn't like no one was kind of like setting out to to try to run these fast times, or no one was going out of the state and competing in meets in California or whatever Florida relays to run a fast time. So that I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You bring up such good points. And it's funny. I tell my kids this all the time too. I always tell them like, why are we racing? And I always say, what's the point of racing? It's to win. It's to win. Like obviously you may not win. The high expectation. I have a middle schooler, and she's not going to win. Probably some of these high scores or anything like that. But make your way through the pack. Compete. The time's going to come. Don't worry about the time right now. Just compete. And as long as you're always trying to get up in the pack and make your way to the front, that you're going to be just fine. Um, and you do see that a lot nowadays too, where all these track meets nowadays is like they're pumped up to like get fast times, get PRs, and um, you know it Is nothing wrong with it, but it does take. It almost seems like every week there's this invitational, there's this distance carnival or and whatnot, and it's more just like, oh well, I'm gonna hop into this heat because there's 20 heats of the mile that we're doing tonight, and I'll just PR and instead of really nobody's really worried about the race. They just care about the PR,
Yeah, yeah,
more or less. Like, oh yeah, I came in 10th place, but I ran X time, and it's like, I mean, I see your point. I do see your point for sure. I want to, as much as the high school success that you had, I do want to touch up on Clemson. I'm curious, like why Clemson? We've had David Adams on the podcast, state cross country record holder, 1437, and he went to Clemson alumni. Seems like everybody loves Clemson. So just curious of like why did you choose Clemson out of any other place?
yeah, yeah. At the time, like I say, I, you know, I wasn't. I think I the the best track program in this area was Tennessee. Tennessee was a big program, and then so they were the like national champions and things like that. So, but I wasn't. My times was only like at the time my best time in the 16 was 420, 155. So I wasn't getting recruited by any big schools. You know, Southern and Furman, and it looked like I was going to go to Furman because that was about the best um, place I could go. But when I ran 151 in the 800 in the close coaches classic, um, that's when I started getting national bigger schools. Was looking at because at that time that was the fastest schoolboy time in the country. So now, you know, so but Clemson at that time, Clemson was ACC champions in the cross country. They had in this region they had the best um, uh, cross country team in this area, and uh, it was Clemson, and they had some foreign. They had a lot of foreign runners that was really good runners. So my thing was, at my high school, I was the MVP of the track team since the ninth grade. So my goal was I need to go somewhere where I'm not the top person. I want to go to a school where I'm not the top, and then now I can grow and develop and be as good as those please. So at the time, Clemson had all Americans distance running like in steeplechase, 5K, top 10 in cross country. No other school in this area had it. NC State was kind of close, but now I could go to Clemson. I'd be kind of close to home, and plus I like Clemson had just won the national championship in football, so I was like, and then also I like basketball. I University of North Carolina, and I was thinking I was going to get to see Michael Jordan play if I go to Clemson. So those was all the factors, but the main thing was that Clemson at the time they had the best distance runners in this South region, and that was my main reason I wanted to go where there were runners that were better than me from high school.
Now, the transition from high school to college, was it easy for you to kind of make that transition, or were you kind of struggling a bit to try and kind of keep the pace with those guys? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, obviously they help you grow, but
Yeah, yeah. It was a mixed bag because like once again I you know I wasn't really a natural runner. Like my thing is on my free time I want to play basketball. Going running, that was something. So my senior year, well, going into my freshman year in the summer, I didn't really run a lot because I did have stress fractures in my shins, so I couldn't really run. So I just figured, well, once I get there, I'd kind of do like I did in high school, just practice, get myself in shape. And I was in a rude awakening cross country. I mean, uh, I remember we were ranked number 2 in the country in the preseason poll, and they had my name on there as the freshman that's going to take them to the top and all this. And man, I was running like for 8K, I was running like 29 minutes. I couldn't the first 8K race, but I didn't have any background. I didn't. You have to run miles and miles and miles and background. You know, you got to average at least 60, 70 miles a week to be able to run in 8Ks and 10K cross country meets at that level at Division One, and I didn't have that kind of background, so I wasn't even good enough to make the cross country team. I had to get redshirted. It was just that whole fall. It was just a catastrophe for me. But then once indoors came, once again, it was just like I I was in the 1,000 meters. That was my first indoor. I've never ran indoor before. I never ran 1,000 meters, but my first invitational meet, I almost broke the school record. Came in like second in the race, and then the next race I broke the school record, qualified for NCAA's. So track was kind of like it was just like it was so natural to me. By my in March, we started doing outdoor meets. I broke the Clemson school record in 800. I ran 148.66 very first race. I mean, it was just the 1600. I'm running not six. We were running 1500. I'm running 346. Right. I mean, I'm doing this in dual. So track was so easy for me. It was like, and I eventually, I was. I ran 147 later that year. I was the fastest freshman in the country in track and made it to nationals. And then and then in the juniors, I won the national junior. It was just 19 and under. I won the U.S. national championship in the 1500. So track was, uh, it was just, it just came so easy, but cross country didn't. And then, you know, for my 18th birthday, I ran an international meet and got tripped, and I got tripped in the race, and I tore all my ligaments in my left knee. That that right there, um, yeah, it definitely stalled my running career at that point, and I had to sit out all the next year, so I didn't even run races when I was 19. I started back racing again when I was probably about 20. I was a redshirt sophomore, 338 my sophomore year in college. So it was just track came very easy for me, but cross country was a different story.
Yeah, that's wild. It's definitely
Yeah,
wild.
yeah,
Um, um,
and
you
and
know,
I think
yep,
a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just my mentality. I think looking back at it, if I actually liked running, I probably would have ran more doing, and I'd have more
yeah,
mileage, and then I probably could have been a better cross country runner, or I don't know. It was just weird. It was just all I thought about is, hey, what can I do to win the races? And that's all I would think about in training is winning races. I never thought about trying to go real fast and all that. But to go real fast, I definitely would have to put in more mileage, more running than what I was doing. Like I wasn't really. I'm still running like 5 days out of the week, 40,
yeah.
40, 50 miles a week. I'm doing a little bit more than what I was doing in high school, but it was just weird. But I just knew my whole focus was on what can I win the ACC champion? Can I win the NCAA champion? What is it takes to win those races? And those races back then, it was kind of sit and kick races. It was people, it was strategy. It wasn't like you had a rabbit and you just follow the rabbit. It wasn't time trial races. So that's kind of how I trained. I prepared myself to be able to have a kick at the end to win my races. So it was a little different for me looking back compared to now.
Yeah, no, that's and like you said, it's so different now from back then to nowadays. Um, I want to talk about you, you can't not talk to you and not talk about the Olympics. I I'm curious though about the trials. Did you have expectations that you were going to go in there and make the team, or was it just like kind of a shockaroo to kind of like because going through um prelim like all the different heats and everything. It's not just doing one race and calling it a day. What were your expectations at the trials?
Well, see, I that was the '92 Olympic trials where I made the team, but I had already ran in the eight when I was in college. I ran in the '88 Olympic trials, and in the '88 Olympic trials, going into the that trials, I was kind of like in a slump prior to that. So I had entered the 800 and the 1600. So I thought maybe I had done peaked out, but then when I was in the 800, I made it to all the way to the semifinals, and then in the 1600, in the 1500, I made it to the finals, and I was with 200 meters to go. I was winning the race, but then I got out kicked at the end. So that was in '88. So when '92 came, I was already prepared. By this time, I knew what to expect.
Yeah, no. Just give me 1 second. I'm just fixing this thing here. So you talk about that like going to expect. Was there any time during the trials um that you thought you had like I don't want to say you had it in the bag, but there are some races where I feel like even during the race where you feel like oh I got this, like this is like it's not gonna slip away. Was there any time during the trials that you just knew like well this is my time, like if like I feel it this one like this is it's mine to it's mine to lose, like there's no way I got it in the bag.
Yeah, yeah. Like in '92, by this time I was in 1991. I had already ran on the international circuit. I was the defending U.S. national champion in the 1500. So I had already made the world championship team. I've run. So I was ranked at this time. I was at least the second. I was this ranked number two in the nation for his milers or 1500 meter. So going into in the Olympic trials in '92, this was it. This is I experienced it in '88. I could have probably made a team in '88. It was a lot of mistakes I made, but this race this time the only thing that kind of hurt me, only thing that kind of made me a little apprehensive in '92 was that I had suffered a injured pull of muscle in my left thigh back in January. So I couldn't really train like I normally would train. I didn't really train at the same level like I had trained in 1991. And so that was the only thing that made me a little bit apprehensive going into the 1992 Olympic trials. So I had only ran a couple of races before the Olympic trials, and then once I started going through the rounds, I started getting start feeling, okay, yeah, my leg look like it's going to hold up. And then, but 92, I definitely was more mature, prepared. I knew what the Olympic trials was all compared to 1988. 88, I was just young, naive about a lot of things, but I was doing well. It's just I didn't have the knowledge because if had I knew certain things back in '88, I probably could have made the '88 team. So, but it took that experience.
Yeah, and I asked this question because I've asked a lot of guys that have won state recently. You know, the last mile, do you know yet? Like, it's yours. In the finals, did you know? Like, is there a point at any time during that race where it's like, I'm gonna make the team? Like, you just because I mean, you can't really look back. Obviously, like you're not. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but was there any time where it's just like in that race, in that finals, you got it, or were
Well,
you
it,
just
it,
running?
it was it it was kind of weird. It was kind of because in the finals, so like the final race, that it was on a Sunday, so it's like one of the last races of the Olympic trials, and I had them. This was in New Orleans, so they spread our races out 10 days apart, 3 rounds, 10 days apart. So I had a strategy. My strategy was because everybody expect me to be in the sort of in the back or in the middle and then kick at the end. So that's kind of what all the other athletes that they've seen me do this, and this is how I normally race. But I had already made up in my mind I wasn't going to run from the back. I was going to be at the front all the time, and I'm going to be at least at least in third place from the get go all the time. So that's what was my strategy. So, and when the gun went off, I got myself right up there early on, right in third position. But then they have these clocks. They have clocks on the track where you can see your splits. And somehow the clock broke. So it stopped. So it stopped at 54 seconds. Now I know we didn't run 54 the first lap, but when I got to that, I'm seeing 54 seconds. So I'm like, I don't know if, because I'm using the clock to determine my pace and all this. That threw me off. So now the clock is not, I can't even use the clock. I don't know what the splits. I've never been in a race where I'm not hearing splits because that's how I manage my race based off the splits, where I'm at. So I know how much energy I need to exert in these laps. And then, so that was weird. Now, that right there, that was, and I was thinking the clock was going to come back on, but about at the 500-meter mark, because they had another clock at the 500 meter, and it was still showing 54 seconds. So the clock was broke. Oh, you could just hear people screaming. So now it's just a flat out race. It's like, okay, you got to come in top three. So right now you're in three. You're in third place. So you can't let people pass you. So each lap I'm going. So I'm seeing the people that, knowing that, okay, these are the people that could possibly beat me. I could see them. And then I think, now we're getting with 500 meters to go, and I'm, now this is it, whatever energy, because in the 1500, with 500 meters to go, that's when you got to start, making you move. So I remember 500 meters ago, it was four of us right up there. It was like four, and I was still in third. And then with 250 meters to go, I was still in third, but it was a guy, he was right behind me and he kind of hit my heel. So I knew he was there. So I'm like, okay, this is it. This is what you've been training for. You gotta go for it. At that moment I start kicking, the guys in front of me, everybody's kicking. And then I could sense that I was trying to go for the win, but for some reason I couldn't I couldn't get to the front to the lead, but I was right there, and then I could sense that that person that was behind me, I didn't feel him on me anymore, but and then I came in third in the trials. I lost, I wanted to win, but I lost by like 6/800ths of a second. But I was just happy that I won. But the whole race, I didn't know what my splits, I didn't know my time. So that's the only race, pretty much, that's the only race I ever ran where I didn't hear any splits, didn't know any splits. And that was unnerving for me in that race. So that was the only thing I can look back and say, wow, I dodged a bullet on that one.
Oh my gosh. Of all races too. Of all races too. Like,
Yeah, yeah. It was just who would have. I mean, every race I've ever ran in, you always have somebody calling the splits out. I could man. That's how I trained. I mean, coming up through high school, that's how I manage myself. I know my splits. I know not to run too fast in the beginning. I know, okay, third lap, I'm going to start putting the pressure on them. Fourth lap, as long as I know I got the pace real fast, I know, I'm just assuming, hey, these people, they can't handle this pace. They're going to fall off. So that's every race I ever ran in my life. That's what I use. I use the clock to manage what I can do compared to what the other person possibly can't do. But in this race, I couldn't even use the clock. So that was definitely unnerving.
wow. Yeah, that is that's so crazy. Um, kind of to pivot, still in the Olympic scene though. So we make the team. Um, how was that experience? Making the team, going over there. Um, did you have expectations for yourself as far as like how far you could go into the whole thing, or were you just happy to be there, happy to be on the team? Like, walk me through that. Like, how you make the team and it's just like, okay, like just making the team is such a huge accomplishment, let alone like, okay, now we actually have to race. Like I think some people kind of forget that part. Like, okay, well, we still have to race, and you're competing on the world stage now. How was that all for you?
Well, yeah, like I said, prior to that, in 1991, I had got to run on the what they called the Diamond League back then. We call it the IAA circuit. So I had a race. So all the same people that I was going to race with the Olympics, I've already raced them, and I think the biggest going into the Olympics now was like I had mentioned earlier. I had a bad leg injury in January, so I I couldn't train like I normally train, um, and then I had my very first race of the year. That was like in in May, like the second week in May, and my leg was still I was still hobbling. And so the Olympic trials was at the end of June. So my confidence wasn't as high, but then I did have one real good race at the end of May where I came in second. And this was at a sort of IAA race. And that gave me confidence. But I didn't have the exact same confidence like I had the prior year. But when I made the Olympic team, now I'm going to race in the Olympics, but my for some reason it re-aggravated my situation again. So my training wasn't. I couldn't train like I knew I needed to train. So because I'm still having this problem with my leg, and that put a damper on my confidence for us once I got to the Olympics because I'm thinking, okay, I already know, these I raced against these people last year when I was 100% healthy. I know, you know, and right now I'm not 100% healthy. It just psychological. It dampened me. It took away a lot of my confidence. So I didn't run with the same kind of confidence, and that's something I look back at that was disappointing because I just felt like, okay, you know, you're gonna have to, you done altered your training, but it may not be good enough to do it on this stage. Um, so, but it was a great experience for me to go to the Olympics. But I think that was kind of disappointing that I had this injury that it just never quite healed up. And so in 1992, I only ran like maybe that year, I only ran about less than 10 races. I probably only ran about 7 races the whole season because I had this leg injury or leg or back injury that it just hampered me. So, but I was very happy that I made the Olympics because all pretty much ever since high school, everybody see me running. It's like, you going to the Olympics, and I was like, oh, I don't know, we'll see. And so, ever since like 1983, that's like if I had a dollar for every time somebody asked me, you going to the Olympics, I'd at least had $1 million in my pocket because so I that's what I had to do. I had to train so I can tell these people, yeah, I'm going to the Olympics because anytime somebody see me running, training, oh, you going to the Olympics? You going to that was it. So that part of it, I was I had a lot of gratification in the fact that I did make the Olympic team. I was a little disappointed that I wasn't 100% healthy at that time, but it I like when I was 18 years old, once I had tore all my ligaments in my leg, I didn't. A lot of people didn't think I was. A lot of doctors, they didn't think I was going to be able to run back at the level I was running at. So I, my journey to the Olympics was, it was definitely, um, it was definitely something I worked real hard to do. I stayed focused on it. I'm very disciplined. Like I said, I had a lot of God given talent. I mean, just looking back at it and looking at runners now, and I remember kids I coached in high school. I mean, they train harder than I trained in high school and all that. And I just know it's a lot of times it's a lot of God given talent. And I just know when I start running on the international level, I mean, it just it's amazing stuff you see in runners. They can, I was pretty good on the international level, but I wasn't never a superstar. But I was just fortunate to be, high school All American, college All American, and then be able to make, three, four. I made all of the U.S. national teams. Matter of fact, as far as being a U.S. miler, I've made every every team that is possible to represent the United States in the mile. So I've made them all. From it's not a race. It's not a mile race that I've never been invited to. So that's something I'm pretty proud of. That I was good enough. I was a very good you know for as internationally, I was always in the top 20 in the world in the mile, so I could get invited to a lot of big mile races. I was always like within the top three in the United States, so I would get invited to big races in the miles. Um, you know, that's something I'm very proud of, and the fact that I made the Olympic team. That right there, because prior to that, I had already every U.S. national team that exists. I had already made those teams. So that was really the last team I needed to make um, to say, okay, I was one of the best milers in the country, and you know, I would always get selected to run with the best runners against the best runners in the world. So That's kind of how my experience was for us the Olympics. It was definitely uh, for as having all eyes on you. For us being around in the Olympic Village, I had a lot of fun. The knowledge of just knowing that everybody in the world is every day they just focusing on what you're doing in the Olympics. Now that was kind of that that was definitely different than just running track meets, because most track meets, not only people that know something about track is focusing on, but the Olympics, you could feel it. Like you just walking around Barcelona, uh, you could, you doing the town, back in the United States, everybody is focused on it. I just remember my brother and my coach, they had came over to the Barcelona, and my brother, he had a hotel. His hotel room was in the Hilton, where the NBC headquarters was, because they were the ones that was putting on. So he was in the hotel with all the NBC workers, uh, and they, he was telling them, yeah, I got a brother that's in the Olympics, because they was like, well, how you get in this hotel? It's only NBC, and like it was weird. It was like, and he watched a lot of TV, so he knew like Katie Couric, all these people. He was eating breakfast with them. He was like eating lunch there. So he kept telling, yeah, I got a brother. So then I would go over there and visit him in the evenings, and man, I'm sitting there with all these Ahmad Rashad and all these people that putting on the Olympics, Katie Couric, they know my brother like he works for NBC. He was like he knew everybody. So the fact that I was in the Olympics, I mean that was funny. It was like every evening I go over there and hang out with him. And I'm sitting there with O.J. Simpson and all these people who putting on the Olympics. That was funny. Yeah, it was a great experience though.
No, that's so cool. And I think all of us, have dreams of you know, racing in high school and having success, and getting to college and having success, and then obviously it even dwindles down even lower when you go professional. And obviously even professionals not a, there's such a small group that even get to be on a world team or an Olympic team. And the fact that you've had such success in all of those, and it whatever the results of those, man, you're an Olympian. Like that's the coolest thing ever. And I think it gives a lot of people that kind of that that notion that hey, like it is possible. It's everything's
Yeah,
possible. And you know be from South Carolina, like you can make it that way. Terrance did it, so it's really cool. One thing I like to kind of end out with, that I kind of started. I wish I would have done it from the very beginning of the podcast, but I always kind of like to ask, like, I think nowadays you see a lot of younger runners, and kind of like middle school, early freshmen, getting into the sport. What kind of advice would you give them who are kind of starting off, whether it be in cross country or track, um, that are just looking to run and maybe join the team, or have dreams of making the Olympics or going to college for running?
yeah. I think my biggest advice is, especially when I think kids should train according to their age. Um, like from my knowledge of now, I know the science of running. Back then, I didn't know the science of running, but now I know the science. You can manipulate when you're young, a high school kid, he could run faster than a 14-year-old kid simply by just running more mileage. And but can his body, what a normal 14-year-old kid should be running? Should a normal 14-year-old kid should be running 60, 80 miles a week? Uh, that may, when he's 18, okay, you're already running 60, 70 miles a week. What you gonna start running 100 miles at 80, and then can your body handle that kind of running that running that much? And that's what my biggest advice to kids is to train according to your age. Because like when I started running, I just know I did do a little AAU track when I was in ninth grade and 10th grade. I couldn't even make it out of the region meet. I don't. I There were people that were beating me in my age group, but by the time my 12th grade year, when I kind of start training according to my body, I was the fastest high school kid in the 1600 and one of the fastest in the 800. But when I was in the seventh, eighth, ninth grade, I wasn't no way. I was probably 500 or something like that. 10th grade, same thing. It's just I I I think as you get older, your body can handle more, opposed to when you start out when you're young. Yeah, you could a ninth grader could start training like a 12th grader, and yeah, he could run phenomenal times as a ninth grader compared to all the other ninth graders. But what is the goal? Is the goal just to be a great high school runner, or do you want to be able to go to college and then ascend from college and then go to the pros and go to the Olympics? And I think, I think that was the biggest. Um, I think that definitely what helped me is because, like I said, I never really trained. I undertrained pretty much. I undertrained a lot. Now it maybe was by I was very naive. I didn't really know the information like is known now, but I think that what helped me because you know I was back then. I did have a lot of leg injuries when I was younger, but I noticed as I got older, once I got like 21, 22, I stopped having all these leg injuries when I used to train. But prior to that, I mean, I every every I could train for 3 weeks, and then next thing my legs are hurting, sore. I have to stop training for a week because my legs are too sore. So that would be my advice to young kids is to kind of train according to your age. Like if you're a sophomore, just kind of focus on uh, training and then leaving something left for you to do more as a junior. And then once you're a senior, now you could do more. And train a little more. And then now when you're senior year, because that's when it's time to get recruited by college um, recruits. I mean, college to go to college, and then um, you know, um, you know, that's when you can really capitalize on your fast times. Is when you a 12th grader because not everybody's going to be like this kid from Texas who run on 142, and not everybody's going to be that like that. But I think you can train too hard at a young age, and then now you stunt your body, you stunt your progress. So it's all about progression, I think, because I know that would help me out tremendously. Like I I just pride myself each year that I got faster each year. I just know I used to sit down and say, okay, every year I've gotten faster. That's all I cared about. I didn't, I kind of accomplished my goals. I made it to the national meet. I got faster, so that's kind of how I did it in that way, opposed to just training too hard and then maybe mess my body all up. So
No, that's great. Uh, and I wish, and I tell kids this all the time. Like, they're everybody's different. Everybody trains a different way, and some ways work for others that just don't work for said person. And I tell my kids this all the time because all three of them run. But I always say like, my son's a freshman this year. I say like, hey man, like I love it if you run fast freshman year, but I'm not really looking at what you're doing freshman year. I care more how you are, junior, senior year. You don't have to, develop, stepping stones. It's like my youngest daughter. We run 4 days a week. She runs 4 days a week. You always hear like the taking a break of 2 weeks. We take a month and a half, 2 months off. Let him be a kid. Let him be a kid. She just ran last weekend. She's in sixth grade and she ran 22:15 for the 5K, and actually was a little bit slower than we were expecting. But it's just development and it's growth over time, and I think that's where like we all want to be just like we want to be that fast, so quick, and like you said, you see everything on the internet, and it's like, hey, if you run 60 miles a week, you can drop your 5K time down, and so there is a lot out there that can kind of
Yeah.
it's good that it sparks the interest, but it's like you got to just do it the right way, and I think that's where just good coaching also kind of comes into play, and mentoring and teaching the sport, not just going out and do the miles. But Terrance, man, I appreciate you coming on, man. Such good vibes, good stories. I think everybody's gonna be really they're just probably gonna have more questions. I would love to have you back on sometime and continue to talk, and just appreciate everything you've done for the sport, for the United States of America, but also just for South Carolina, man. Like that's what this channel is really like highlighting, is the Carolinas, and obviously just someone who has paved the way for high school runners and everyone, and can't thank you enough for everything you've done for the sport and everything you continue to do for the sport. So like this coming on here, so I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's my pleasure, you having me here, to hear what I have to say. Like I say, um, yeah, I just know 40 years ago, it was different compared to now, and now it's like these kids are phenomenal. Is like I still kind of go to track meets, and watch high school kids, and I'm amazed with them. But they, South Carolina is definitely, they got a lot of national class athletes compared to when I was national class. Now South Carolina, they got like 20. They got 20 or 10 or more than 20 national class runners. So it's definitely what you're doing, bringing light to South Carolina is going to increase more elite runners, and uh, hopefully we'll have one that a distance runner that'll make it to the Olympics out of South Carolina again. So that's coming. That's coming.
It's coming. Speaking into existence. All right, Terrance, I appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, goodbye.